engage.
We're following right now and looking at is the potential attack on Basra. We have the British Royal Marines and the U.S. Marines poised to move into that city. May, in fact, have already started to do that now down here near the Persian Gulf. We've also gotten the reports of the surrender of the 51st Mechanized Division, although there may still be some defenders in Basra. That's being worked out right now. The 3rd Infantry Division has left Kuwait, and as we know, are well on their way towards Baghdad, working their way up the Euphrates River Valley and towards the outskirts of Baghdad there. Continue to be bombing missions going into Baghdad and also some other selected targets around the region. As you know, we took those airfields over on the western desert and continue to watch the situation develop up north near Mosul and Kirkuk to Tikrit in that area.
All right, Jack, thanks very much for that update. And let's talk now about the view from the White House. It was there that the chain of events put into motion the order sign that launched this war. And today, President Bush, like many Americans, glued to the television set watching the shock and awe campaign as it played out over Baghdad. Campbell Brown filed this report from the White House.
Good evening. The president is at Camp David tonight. He will be spending the weekend there. We saw him only briefly today after a meeting with congressional leaders. This was a private briefing, a classified briefing for those congressional leaders on the military developments. The president did invite reporters in order to make a few brief remarks directed at the troops overseas, acknowledging the sacrifice they're making right now. We are told that the president was in the Oval Office today when the shock and awe portion of this campaign began. He was on the phone with one of his aides when he found out that the massive bombing had started. He went into a private dining room just off the Oval Office with his chief of staff, Andy Card, and like many of us, watched the events unfold on television. Aides describe him at that moment as resigned to the fact that military action is now necessary. Officials say that he will be meeting with his national security team daily on the phone with his military commanders, but they're quick to point out that he is not micromanaging this war and that we are not expecting to hear from the president over the next couple of days while he is at Camp David. He's going to leave the talking to his generals who are running the show now. I'm Campbell Brown at the White House. Let's go back to you.
And in Central Command headquarters at Doha, Qatar, is where the flow of information will shortly be coming out. NBC's David Schuster is there. And David, we understand that today, Saturday, we will be hearing from General Tommy Franks.
Lester, that's right. Every indication that General Tommy Franks will be having his briefing. It'll be later this afternoon local time, but roughly around the time of the normal morning shows, Saturday morning shows, news shows. But there is a little bit of information that's coming out, not necessarily from Central Command, but from some of the reporters who were embedded with those Marine units and those British Marine units that were in Qasr. You'll recall that it was about a day ago when it seemed that Qasr was firmly in control by coalition forces, but there are now some reports that there's still some pockets of resistance and that the Marines are having to go through and try to find some of those pockets, some of the snipers and some of the other Iraqis who refuse to sort of put down their arms. So a few problems there. In addition, there's still a decision to be made by General Tommy Franks about what to do with Basra. By all accounts, coalition forces have surrounded Basra. 2 Iraqi divisions surrendered. Iraq's 51st Mechanical and their 11th Division both surrendered. Those Iraqi divisions were on the outskirts of the city. The problem for military planners is that Iraq's 3rd Brigade is still in the middle of the city, and they have not yet surrendered. And so there's some question about how the coalition will convince them to do that. There are apparently some discussions going on. There are also some talks apparently with the Basra government, but that, of course, is why it seems that coalition forces are sort of hanging back on the outskirts of Basra and not going in yet. There are a couple of things that military commanders are very pleased about. First of all, the oil fields in southern Iraq, as has been mentioned, firmly in control by coalition forces, and this represents something like 65% of Iraq's total oil capacity there in the south. And they've only found that 10 of the wells had been lit on fire out of about 1,000, and even those were mostly oil trenches, so no major damage there. In addition, a couple of other things that military commanders had worried a lot about going into this war over the last couple of days, and that was the potential use of chemical weapons while a number of the coalition forces were essentially concentrated in Kuwait. That has not happened. There have also been no dams or no dikes that have been blown, and so you don't have the prospects of massive flooding or a large number of refugees being created in southern Iraq that might somehow impede the movement of coalition forces. There are still, though, some major dangers. Once the coalition forces cross the Euphrates River, then they will start facing some of the Republican Guard units. There have been no engagements yet with the Republican Guard units, and there is some fear that the Republican Guards might be the ones to use chemical or biological weapons. And then, of course, there is the potential problem in northern Iraq. There have been a number of reports that Turkish troops have crossed into northern Iraq, into a region where the Kurds have had essentially an autonomous region there for the last 12 years. The Kurds and the Turks have a long history of hating each other and of fighting amongst themselves. And clearly, with the U.S. not able to put in a northern front because the Turks would not allow airspace, that would not allow U.S. ground troops, that is a situation that has military planners somewhat concerned. But in any case, the U.S. forces, the British forces, continue rolling towards Baghdad. Every indication is that the coalition forces have now gone into Iraq about 100 miles past the Kuwaiti border. Lester?
David Schuster at Doha, Qatar, with our report from Central Command Headquarters. David, thanks. And again, we'll look for General Frank's update later on Saturday. Friday in Baghdad, American forces unleashed the shock and awe that Baghdad and much of the world had been anticipating. It was the most intense bombing so far in this war. National Geographic Explorer's Peter Arnett is in Baghdad, reporting exclusively on MSNBC. He had this vivid account as the bombs fell around him. Keep in mind, this is videotape. Here it is.
More. The sky lit up. Blowing apart the prized presidential compound of Saddam Hussein. Many of his major administrative buildings going up in smoke and fire, Tom. Again, another. Just disintegrating. Bigger than the Gulf War, Tom, the first Gulf War, much bigger, these explosions. This is shock and awe, Tom, for the population of Baghdad. Shock and awe, indeed. Right in front of us, at least 10 major buildings destroyed, Tom, in the course of about 2 minutes. An amazing sight. Just like out of an action movie, but this is real. This is real. This is shock and awe, Tom. The rest of the palace is being taken out, Tom, to the south of us. Other buildings, at least 30, 40 cruise missiles have come in at this point. One building after another going down, Tom. They're taking out whole buildings with these cruise missiles. Whole buildings. Saddam Hussein has constructed the west bank of the city in the past 20 years of his government. It's disappearing before our very eyes. The main presidential compound, the prize of Saddam Hussein, is gone.
That was Peter Arnett earlier, who described the bombing with various intensity for about 90 minutes. And keep in mind, Saturday morning, just before the sun came up, there were more explosions, not nearly as many, but as many as 5 over a period of time, heard this morning in Baghdad, at least one of those apparently striking in a presidential compound that was hit in that earlier strike. But clearly the U.S. will continue to strike where it feels it needs to, even in the daylight. That's going to wrap it up for me right now. Let me turn it over to Forrest Sawyer for more continuing coverage on MSNBC. Forrest?
Thank you, Lester, very much. Of course, we are following the story through the evening. As you say, there have been those attacks really pinging into Baghdad, trying to keep them awake, let them not get off balance, let them not be able to get some sleep, because that massive assault is going to be coming sometime later on this evening. But what about in Kuwait, where we have seen some missiles that have been launched over there from time to time? Phil Rogers is in Kuwait City. How are things faring there now, Phil?
Forrest, good morning. It's been an extremely quiet morning here in Kuwait City. We're just passing 8 o'clock here, and the last missile attack here, the last alert, I should say, happened just before midnight, so we've been about 8 hours in the clear. The last bona fide missile that was discovered landed harmlessly out in the desert, out near one of the air bases just northwest of the city, and there have been a couple of bona fide Patriot intercepts up north of the city, up closer to the border. But right now it's an extremely quiet morning, although the city is on something of an alert. You can't see it behind me, but there is an armored personnel carrier parked down there on the street. It's been there for the last couple of weeks. Those are placed strategically throughout the city. There are checkpoints that have sprung up in the oddest of places. I mentioned on the air a minute ago, even on one exit ramp that we hit yesterday, access to the border is still extremely restricted, although it's believed that's going to be lifted very soon because, in effect, this border is moving further and further north.
I'll tell you, Phil, the sense that I got was that there was a lot of tension and worry there when the Iraqis first started throwing the missiles over, largely because they didn't know whether they might be laced with chemicals or not. But after a while, a certain rhythm has set in. They realize that at this point it looks like it's just some flying tin cans, and life is settling into an odd kind of normal.
Yeah, Forrest, you're exactly right. First of all, a Scud missile and even an Al-Samud, the much ballyhooed Al-Samuds, are something like the modern version of a cannonball. You just shoot them up in the air and hope they come down and hit something. That's number one. Number two, a lot of folks here in Kuwait, while those first attacks did really put them on edge, now they're really seeing these alerts as a giant inconvenience. I mean, you have to put on the gas mask. Some people go to the shelters. Sometimes the alerts can last for 15 or 20 minutes until the wailing all clear siren goes off. And now what you're starting to see is people not taking precautions at all, just going about their daily lives, kind of looking up at the sky every now and then cautiously, but really not letting it affect them much.
Of all the countries in the region, obviously Kuwait is the one that is offering the greatest assistance. I suppose Qatar is as well, but Kuwait is very far forward in all of this in supporting the U.S. when the region is quite troubled about this war. So when you have a chance to go out and talk to folks, what are you hearing?
Of course, you know, it's funny. You talk to folks, they love Americans here. They have put giant pictures on the back of city buses of an Arab man embracing a soldier that just say, "Welcome back." They are very enthusiastic about the presence of Americans here, but make no mistake, this is an Islamic country, and there are fundamentalist sects here, and in fact, you know, there have been some high-level attacks. So everyone is on edge. The Kuwaitis especially are on edge. There's a lot of security on the streets, security in the buildings. You have to go through metal detectors just to get into common buildings like shopping centers and hotels. And so while there is a lot of tension on the streets, Americans are very, very welcome here.
Phil Rogers in Kuwait City. Thank you very much, Phil. We'll be talking to you a little bit later on. Let us bring you a quick look at the latest headlines just to catch you up. A huge explosion shaking the center of Iraq's capital before dawn on Saturday, and as you can see, it's about 8:15 or so right now. Pentagon officials saying those huge airstrikes that we all have gotten used to right now that were in Baghdad and in fact in the northern part of Iraq, Mosul and Kirkuk, all designed to isolate Saddam Hussein's regime, to force surrender, shock and awe. And that is what is going to be going on again later tonight. They're just throwing a few things in there to keep them on their toes during the day. Number of Americans killed during this conflict now has risen to 6 dead. 2 Marines died in some tough fighting in the south, and you recall that 4 were killed overnight in a helicopter crash in Kuwait. Along with those 4, 8 British Royal Marines. It's a crash that some say was caused by weather, others say might have been caused by some of the oil smoke from the burning oil well fires. They'll have to look into it. American soldiers have now captured the port city of Qasr. Hundreds of underfed, overwhelmed Iraqi soldiers, this is not unlike what we saw in 1991, have surrendered. But do remember, this is a regular force. This is not the Republican Guard that people are worried might stand and fight. The Army outflanking some Iraqi positions, just going right past them so that they can avoid a needless fight. They are moving quickly. They are driving toward Baghdad, and others are driving toward Tikrit. Now, we remind you, we do recap the latest headlines on the Iraqi crisis for you.